I am Robert. I am RWJ Blue online most everywhere. The general problem that I have is I do too much open source. I tend to get a little bit deep and involved, and we'll see a little bit about that in a minute. I work at LinkedIn on a really, really awesome team. I have the privilege of being able to work on open source, mostly for work, which is a position I've not really been in a full-time way before, and it's really awesome. And if any of y'all have the opportunity, come up and chat with me. I'd love to talk to you about that. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So this is my GitHub timeline in 2013. GitHub added this new feature where you could go back in time and look at specific years, and it's very frightening how much time I've wasted. But check this out. So I just was like a normal random person, like doing little things. Some of these are in my own repo. Some of them are like fixing little bugs in like Ruby gems or something at the time probably. But you can really see where I got involved with Ember because it started sucking up all of my time. So late in August of 2013, just before Ember 1.0 was released, I joined the IRC channel and I started chatting with folks and immediately got sucked into building that really horrible builds page on the website. That's my fault. So thankfully, Ricardo is working his butt off to replace that and make it not horrible. So then you can kind of see I really found my home here, and I sort of continued through, and then a little bit more, and then I want to show you something I'm really, really quite proud of. I have blank squares. That's what you should go for, not the other thing, right? So everyone talks to how do you work so much? How do you do so much? That is not the question to ask. The question to ask is can you work less? How can I do less? How can I take time off and spend with my family? Anyways, speaking of family, my wife, my kids, they put up with so much stuff so that I can do what I do. And oftentimes, I hope they're not, but oftentimes I feel like sometimes they're suffering. And I always like to give a big shout out to them for supporting me and letting me and propelling me into what I've done and what I can do. So without them, I literally am nothing. So, okay, so let's talk about Glimmer. First of all, I wanted to say there were more emoji, and then I went to do the present view, and apparently Google Slides totally falls down and dies if you have actual emoji in your text. So I frantically removed them all, and it made me very sad. So sad face emoji. So Matt stole all. So Matt ended up going before me, obviously, and stole all my thunder. You have seen all of my talk already, and we're just going to jump into Q&A, I think. So anyways, so Glimmer is possibly the first framework that is designed in a mobile-first way. We specifically created the Glimmer.js framework, not Glimmer as a rendering technology, but Glimmer of the framework for mobile, targeted at mobile, very specifically with that in mind. It may well be the first. I'm not sure if it is, but I believe that it is. Certainly the first I'd heard of. It's leveraging service workers, and it's optimized for your happiness. But really, let's look at what makes it what makes it good, what makes it attractive to those outside of Ember, and then also what makes it attractive to Ember, right? For Ember users, for folks in this room probably who are building Ember apps, right? Or as Matt would say, we are not Ember developers, we are web developers. So what makes this work for us? What makes this attractive? Why should y'all care about Glimmer? Well, first of all, this slide is from. This is basically just the size of the framework itself. This is as of March, I want to say, so right after release. So you can see we're actually quite small. I extended this thing. I stole this this image, but we extended it so Glimmer's on the bottom, even though technically it should be just above you. But whatever, it looks better this way. Looks better this way. So as you can see, like like this is a big factor, right? So Ember weighs in at like 129K. I'm certainly not one to talk about being overweight, but you know, but it's a thing, you know, and it's really hard to deal with just the parse time of the JavaScript alone on a mobile device with that much JavaScript. So one of the things we wanted to make sure was that Glimmer didn't have that problem. Like, it was small. You could pick and choose pieces. Now this is another chart, and this is, I think, very contrived, though Matt and I disagree. I think this is super contrived. This is from a blog post where someone said, what is the like hello world size of all built apps built for production? So you do, in our case, Ember new, or in the React case, like create React app. Like when you do a build from that thing for production, how big are they? And of course, in Ember's case, we're including basically everything we think you will need to successfully build an ambitious web app. Whereas in like the Preact or React case, like it's like literally just the framework and a couple of enabling technologies, and that's it, right? So it's very apples to oranges, which is why I kind of hate it. But it's enlightening. The Hello Glimmer sort of app is right in line with the others. It's very competitive. We have since this time, this was done in late March, since this time, we've shaved another 3K off the total size of a Glimmer, like Ember, a new app, like Hello World app. So we are continuing to go down as well we can. So this is good. We do really well here. Notice the icon are in the proper order now. And so Glimmer also brings with it a bunch of really neat syntax, new syntax. Some of it looks very foreign. Some of it feels very natural. So the first thing here is this is the component invocation syntax. In Glimmer, this would invoke the user greeting component and pass it args of name and greeting. The class is an attribute. That class, this is going to be passed to the root element of the invoked component, and it'll end up being merged, right? So on the invoking side, if you pass in args and attributes, attributes, they end up getting put on the root element, which is kind of nice. So that gets rid of the arms race of attribute bindings. Every add-on author up there who has had to like merge a pull request adding another item to attribute bindings, I am very sorry. But this sort of thing lets us get rid of that. Basically allows Glimmer components to always reflect the attributes that are passed in to the root element, so you don't have to have this like ever-increasing list of all possible attributes ever known to man. It's really gnarly when you start talking about data attributes or ARIA roles or ARIA attributes where there's like a seemingly limitless number of them. Okay, so then we have like this really nice class syntax. So obviously we're using modules to import a Glimmer component, and then we can use classes to just, class extends component. This is really great. This is really sleek. This is, I love this. I love this syntax. This is ultimately, we're using rollup in the Glimmer build, and it lets us tree shake the parts of Glimmer you don't use. So if you actually had no components, what the hell are you doing? But if there's other parts that you didn't use, you might, you would just not have that cost in your payload, which is really neat. So that sort of tree shaking capability is sort of baked into the tooling. It's part of the build. It's also why it's slightly longer to build, but that's a separate story. So along with classes, because we're not passing like pojos around, we get like real getters and real setters, and like we can use nice things. Like we can have nice things. Don't tell anybody I told you that though. This is the only British show that I watch. Sorry. So in addition to that, we've leveraged some decorators. Of course, I messed up the import, so you should be importing tracked, but just don't worry about it. So tracked is a decorator, which is roughly akin to notifying the rendering engine that, hey, this thing is going to update, and when it does, I want you to re-render any usages of name here. You can think of it like dependent keys for your computed properties or something like that. But unlike computed properties and dependent keys, it doesn't allow paths. There's no dot-separated paths in there. You literally would just you just say args, and then everything, it's just watching the whole object. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done here to make this even more ergonomic and more obvious, but this is nice, right? We can use class syntax. We don't have to drop down into like prototype land and like contact.prototype.name equals whatever, right? We don't have to do all that stuff, or define property or whatever. So this is great. I like this. Some of you will also like this. So the base Glimmer app is using TypeScript. You can like annotate your types for the args you expect to be passed in. You can get really nice syntax checking. So, but it's really great. You can get awesome inline checking for things that like to enable refactorings that you probably would have struggled more with before. In the case of TypeScript with the Glimmer project itself, it's really enabled us to continue forward, pushing the boundaries of some of the refactorings and leveraging the compiler telling us like when something is messed up. It's been quite awesome. Okay, so now all those awesome things Matt talked about, I'm going to tell you about too, and he stole my thunder, so what a jerk. But you can install these. You can install these add-ons. They like just work. So at the end of this, you get an almost 100 score on Lighthouse, or if you're not lazy, you can get 100 score. You just have to deal with the HTTP to HTTPS redirect, and I didn't feel like dealing with it. So it's trivial. You just have to read Matt's article. He'll tell you exactly how to do it. It's great. Now, talking about this, so I showed a bunch of add-ons, right, that you can use. Well, at least 3, I think 4. But anybody that's tested, used a Glimmer app before is probably going to say, but you can't use add-ons with Glimmer yet. Unfortunately, you're right. You're also kind of wrong, but you're right. It's just not a clear-cut thing whether a given add-on will work with Glimmer or not. For example, I think the simplest heuristic is whether the add-on provides an app directory or an add-on directory. If it does, then it's likely tied to Ember specifics. It's probably extending ember.component or extending services or like whatever its functionality is. If it doesn't, it's possibly a build time only add-on, and it may well work. There were some small changes that I had to do to the Glimmer application pipeline to enable Ember web app to work. I did that the other day, conference-driven development. Some of those things are quite easy to do, and we can continue to iterate forward. The reason we haven't just added every hook known to man that exists in Ember Cli is at least 2 reasons. The first one is some of those hooks are really wet. We learned a lot during the course of the iteration cycle of this current Broccoli pipeline that's for Ember apps, and we're trying to leverage the learnings that we did there and bring them to Glimmer and abstract a common shared base class, essentially, so that you have things like tree4, which are kind of nice, and you don't have as many things like content4 or some of the like weird lists of hooks that are there. So I encourage you, add-on authors or folks trying to test out Glimmer apps, try an add-on. Look through it, see what makes it tick and why it works. Figure out if it works, and if not, if you feel like it's a build time add-on or something, feel free to raise an issue on the Glimmer app pipeline repo, and we can try to look into it and figure out what is missing for the next level. There's a whole slew of other add-ons that also are already used that I didn't show. Things like Ember Cli Bevel. Obviously, that is a build time add-on. It's responsible for like transpiling from ES latest. TypeScript compiles down to ES latest, and then we transpile from that to whatever your targets are. We also use ESLint. We use many other add-ons at build time. So any build-related add-on probably can be made to work, but test it out, let us know, file an issue in the Glimmer app pipeline repo. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about Ember. So this is comparable like to the last slide, the other slides. This is Ember syntax. I like the other one better. So this object model that we have in Ember has been around a very long time. It predates me in my involvement with Ember for sure. But I believe it came from the Sprott Core era, and it existed long before we had decent browsers. The term that I am coining here, you heard it here first. It was pre-postmodern JS, and basically many frameworks or many other folks had their comparable object models. There was no such thing as classes at the time. That wasn't even thought of really in the JavaScript space at least. TC39 still was like wandering around in the wilderness of like ES4. Shout out. So none of that existed. We needed to build apps. We needed to do things. Like we had to ship, right? So this object model let us do that. It's quite mature. The internals at least don't change that often. It's been stable for quite a number of years, since really the 1.x timeframe, 1.0. The internals of the object model haven't changed dramatically. Many other people had these same sort of object models. Like I know Dojo had one. I know like even CoffeeScript compiled to. It's like it had this class syntax, and it compiled down to its own object model. So like it's a super common thing. And it's been stable. You're still using it today, and it's like a dinosaur as far as like the age of JavaScript ecosystem. So the reason we can't have this or we don't have it yet, is mostly because it's really important for us while working on the project to make sure that no one's stuck. No one is just left behind. There's no apps that can't upgrade or can't migrate forward. Now, speaking of this, wouldn't this be great? Show of hands. Who prefers this class syntax over this? OK. I think I'm going to say it's everyone. There's probably one person that either was totally ignoring me or is just being a jerk. But it's fine. So, OK. So, like, why can't we do this? What's blocking us from doing this, right? Like, classes were designed as a language feature at the, like, essentially pushing of all the people that had built their own object models, right? Like, we need classes. We need some simpler way than, like, typing that prototype 50 billion times, right? This is nice. And classes are supposed to be just like ES5 compatible, right? So if we had done the right thing and didn't make our own thing and had just regular ES5 prototypal classes, this would work for us. So I wrote a test. I'm like, OK, let's write a test. This syntax, you probably shouldn't write tests like this, but whatever. It's nice. It all fits on a slide, though, so hey. So I create a class, extending from Ember service, and then I register it and then look it up. Does it exist? Is it the right instances? Is it the right thing? This test passes. This test has passed for at least one LTS cycle. So since Ember 2.12, at least. I didn't test further than that just because I'm lazy. But yeah, it passes. This works. And it works because of the standards process, because of the stability in the way we used just all the .extend stuff compiles down to just normal JavaScript, right? So this works. Now, you'll notice this is not what's in the blueprints, right? This is not what we tell you to do in the guides. This is not what we tell you to do in the API docs. The reason for that is that there are still caveats, right? There are still things that are not done. For example, sorry, jumping ahead of myself. Sorry. This would be great too. Notice the super shiny new at Ember/component JS modules API stuff. Also, that totally works today. You should just use it. It's awesome. Tobias has done a wonderful job pushing that forward. But this would be great too. So let's see if this works. And this test passes too. This works too. This just works out of the box. No shenanigans, no mumbo jumbo. You can use this in your app technically today. Now, you'll notice there's a lot of problems here. I'm completely ignoring a whole bunch of stuff that's actually pretty important, right? So in class syntax, how would you do computed properties, right? You can't say like foo : ember.computed. That's not valid class syntax. You can't have an actions hash. Like, where does that go? You have to drop down and do like component name.prototype.actions equals some pojo, right? And that sucks. Nobody wants to do that. If I have to do that, I'd rather use the old thing. There's no like ember inject syntax. Like all those things, they don't work. They're not like a reality, right? So what if? So what do we have that we're looking forward to use for this? We're going to use decorators. That's why we've been working and proposing and trying to advance decorators for quite some time. The decorators currently are at stage 2. I only put this slide up here to show you that it says you should not use stage 2 things in prod. But what do they know? Seriously, don't call me at 3 in the morning. But it should be good. We're working really hard to inform the standards process, to push it forward, and hopefully we get to stage 3 soonish. I'm pretty excited. So what does it look like with decorators? This is another thing that we experimented with Glimmer, and now like this Ember Decorators project was recently renamed from Ember Computed Decorators, if you're familiar with that. It works with Babel 5 and 6 and 7 alpha, but I haven't released a version that does that yet. But this just works. Notice I took some small liberties with the @computed syntax. I will probably get things thrown at me by the other core team members, but I made it so that the dependent keys are passed into the function, so you don't have to like this.get them first. I really like that personally, but it's a little bit magic, but I figure with decorators, it's already basically magic anyway, so it's fine. It's fine. So this works. This basically makes a named computed property. So that's great. So how do we do some of the other things? Here's what an action might look like. And in the end, like the decorator just gets the prototype of the class and the new descriptor you're adding. So it's just doing exactly the same thing that we don't want to write by hand, and assigning the properties of the prototype just like normal, or using define property, or whatever the underlying thing is working on. So we can even do inject service. And we updated the import paths to match roughly what the new JS module API is. So it should feel similar. So you can say @service i18n, and it's going to do basically the same as if you had done ember inject service. And this just works. So I think all of this works. This add-on works. It's a thing you can totally pull down. We're working to make it a little bit more ergonomic and straightforward to use. But for the most part, everything just works. There's some things that I haven't talked about, and things like a tag name or attribute bindings or class names, class name bindings, classes. I don't know. There's like 50 JS APIs for a component, right? All of those things should be like thrown out in the window into the garbage. But we're on the right track. We're getting there. All of this stuff is from our experimentation in Glimmerland. It's coming to us in Ember, and we can use nice things. Unfortunately, the rule of nice things basically says that by the time you get the nice things, you want other things. But we're getting there. And I think that the stability in Ember and the stability that we're bringing to the ecosystem is basically what's going to let us live longer than the others. Now, Glimmer Components. OK. So that's totally trolling. But basically, Glimmer Components are the next step to Ember apps. Now, Matt and I spent, I want to say, a few hours. And we got it working with current Canary of Ember. So like it's close. There's a number of edge cases and problems that we identified and hit as we did it. The idea is you would install @glimmer/component into your Ember app, and you can just invoke and use Glimmer Components directly in your Ember app. It is close to a reality. I really wanted to show a demo of using it, but in the end, it's like we got it to work, but we got it to work by copying and pasting and hand editing the code, which is obviously not ideal. So we made a meta issue of all the, like a punch list of the things that need to be fixed, and we're going to continue to work on that list. I think it's probably very reasonable to say that this will be something that we'll be able to do in the near future in our Ember apps. And then we can start figuring out how to port things back and forth and how to write reusable libraries. And we can continue down the path that we all love today, which basically means we convinced Miguel to do all the work for us and make really nice like components, and then we get to use them. So, okay, now for real, the end.